What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. We are doing a series of Grammys 2022 nominees, and we're going to go category by category. We're not going to get to all the categories, but we're going to get to the 4 major categories and then a few others as well. But we're going to kick this series off with Producer of the Year, non-classical. And I really like this category because basically all of the major genre songs that you're hearing, they're all produced by somebody, and sometimes people lose sight of who is really driving the sound of music for that period, for that era. And you certainly have different eras that are certainly producer eras where you could tell that the sound of the producer influence the sound of the day. Like recently in rap, you know, this trap era, for instance, you had Metro Boomin. Before that, you had like the Lex Luger era. That's when like Gucci Mane was, you know, at his best and so forth. And, you know, you've had like the Lil Jon era. You had the Kanye West and Just Blaze era. You know, just after Metro Boomin really solidified himself, you had others who had a similar sound like Wheezy. Not Wheezy as in Lil Wayne, but the producer Wheezy. You had Turbo. Murda Beats has been hot. But you know, this Producer of the Year non-classical category hasn't had as long a history as some of the other categories. The first Producer of the Year recipient was Thom Bell. This was in 1975. Thom Bell's like one of the architects of the R&B sound of the time, known as the Philadelphia sound. So this was just after that Motown era. I mean, Motown was still around, still making hits. I mean, the Jackson 5 didn't really debut until like 1970 with ABC, that album with I Want You Back and so forth. But just after the late 60s Motown Prime era, that's when you had Diana Ross, you know, her group, The Supremes, and you had The Temptations when they were still doing My Girl and Get Ready and all of those hits. So after that part of the Motown era, you got into the 70s and the Philadelphia sound was kind of king at the time. So the actual Grammy wasn't issued out until 1975 for Thom Bell, who a few years before finally receiving the Grammy, you know, because there wasn't a Grammy to be received for this category. You know, he did Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time by the Delphonics. He did Hey Love by the Delphonics. He did You Are Everything by the Stylistics. He did People Make the World Go Round by the Stylistics. And then by like 72, he did The Spinners' I'll Be Around and Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, also by the Spinners. But the one that he actually received that award for in 75 was for songs like Break Up to Make Up by the Stylistics and You Make Me Feel Brand New, also by the Stylistics. So Thom Bell was the first winner of this award. When you look at the history of the award, you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, Kenneth Babyface Edmonds has more wins than anybody. He's got a total of 4 wins in this category. Think about that. He won it in 93, he won it in 96, 97, and 98. So he actually won 3 Producer of the Year awards in a row. So this is, you know, when he was just on top, red hot, producing like the biggest hits for like Boyz II Men. He had his solo career, which was just on fire at the time. He pretty much had the slower ballad R&B sound on lock. This was just on the heels of the New Jack Swing era. So going into the mid-90s when you had like those love ballads. This is before like the Jagged Edge Jiggy era. Babyface was just ruling the roost. I mean, the other big producer at the time, which I'll get to, were Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. But Babyface, you know, L.A. Reid and Dallas Austin were doing their things at LaFace. But LaFace was obviously L.A. Reid and Babyface before Dallas Austin was producing some hits for like TLC. So yeah, Babyface was killing it. He's got more awards than anybody, or more wins in this category. He's got 4. David Foster, now, you know, Catherine McPhee's husband, which is, I mean, it's interesting. My little sister was a American Idol top 10 finalist back in, this is 2006. She was 16 years old at the time. But yeah, Catherine McPhee, she ended up coming in second. Catherine McPhee did. So I got the chance of like hanging with her, and my little brother actually did the entire tour, because when you make the top 10, you get to go on tour. So my sister was on tour with like, you know, Kelly Pickler and Catherine McPhee, Chris Daughtry. And so my little brother got to hang with them and, you know, got to party with all them for like that entire summer. But yeah, David Foster has 3 wins. David Foster has like a ton of mega hits. Like if you want to, I mean, everything from earlier stuff like Chicago in the 70s to Whitney Houston's I Have Nothing in 1992 to Through the Fire. That was the Shaka Khan song that Kanye West, decades later would sample for Through the Wire. Yeah, David Foster wrote Through the Fire. Unbreak My Heart by Toni Braxton. That was like in the mid-90s. Yeah, David Foster's got 3 wins in this category, as do Quincy Jones and Pharrell Williams. They all 3 of them, David Foster, Quincy Jones, Pharrell Williams, have 3 wins. It's interesting with Quincy Jones because he's largely known as like the guy who produced like Thriller and Off the Wall for Michael Jackson and Bad by Michael Jackson. So those 3 albums, Off the Wall, Thriller, the all-time seller, and Bad, were produced by Quincy Jones. But like decades before that, he was like a major figure in the jazz game. He's like a esteemed, famed trumpetist. So when you look at his history, including his solo work with albums like The Dude or Big Band Bossa Nova, I think. For instance, he did like, that Austin Powers theme song. He did that decades before the Austin Powers movie. Yeah, Quincy Jones is much more than just Michael Jackson producer. That's just when everything culminated into the biggest pop sensation imaginable. But yeah, Quincy Jones is as vetted and as accomplished a musician, pretty much as it gets. And yeah, he's one of the guys with 3 wins in this category. Now, the person who's been nominated the most times by far with 11 nominations were Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. They were kind of almost the kings of the New Jack Swing era and pretty much produced for like Janet Jackson all through like the late 80s into the 90s and through the 90s. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, if you look at their background and the amount of songs that they wrote or produced or both, it's unfathomable. Again, 11 nominations in this category for Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. To put that into perspective, the next highest amount of nominations in the category were David Foster and Quincy Jones with 7 nominations. So yeah, after that 11 by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, you got to go all the way to 7 nominations. So yeah, they had such a relevant and influential period. Like their prime in production was so extended to where you get that many nominations. The latest winner of this category was Andrew Watt, who beat out Jack Antonoff, who's nominated again this year, Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys, Dave Cobb, and Flying Lotus. Andrew Watt is the current winner. Phineas, Billie Eilish's brother, was the winner the year prior to that. Jack Antonoff and Dan Auerbach were nominated again that year as well. So let's get into this year's nominees. This year's nominees are Jack Antonoff, Roget Chahayed, Mike Elizondo, Hit Boy, and Ricky Reed. Now, Jack Antonoff's been, nominated a few times now. In fact, him and Ricky Reed, nominated this year, have both been nominated 3 times for this award, but neither have yet been voted as the winner of the award. So if one of them 2 win this year, it'll be their first. Now, Jack Antonoff, he's had such a great track record over the past few years. His first big hit was For Fun. Remember the song We Are Young with Janelle Monáe? That was Jack Antonoff's real breaking out party. And, he's also known by his artist name, which is Bleachers. And Bleachers had a release this past year. So that actually goes into one of the things that have him nominated this year because he produces, obviously, as Bleachers. In fact, he was actually a member and producer in the band Fun. So when they had that really successful album, Some Nights, with, We Are Young, yeah, he pretty much produced all of that. He also, like in a couple years later, I think this is like 2012, 2013, he produced Brave by Sarah Bareilles, who's, had a couple big hits over the years. But Brave was a big one in 2013. But it's really been his work over the past few years that's really put him over the top. And I think he should have already won one of these awards by now. Like, he produced Mass Education, or at least several of the songs from Mass Education by St. Vincent in 2017. In that same year, he released an album under Bleachers that same year, 2017. But he also produced Lorde's Grammy-nominated album, Melodrama. He produced Taylor Swift's Reputation, or several songs from it in that same year, including the big hit song, Look What You Made Me Do. A year later, or should I say 2 years later, he produced Lana Del Rey's Norman Effing Rockwell in its entirety. He produced the whole album. And that album was pretty much like critically recognized as the best album of the year. He also produced Taylor Swift's 2019 album, Lover. And then the next year, 2020, he produced the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, comeback album, Gaslighter. He produced a few songs from Taylor Swift's Folklore album. And then this year, he produced things like Lana Del Rey's Chemtrails Over the Country Club album. He produced St. Vincent's Daddy's Home album, which, you know, critically was pretty much up there in the top 10, top 15 best albums of the year by St. Vincent. He produced an album by Clairo, C-L-A-I-R-O. She's a pretty successful artist with a, you know, growing reputation. He produced this past year's Lorde album, Solar Power, which wasn't as critically acclaimed as Melodrama. So, you know, if anything kind of holds him back, it was that Lorde's album kind of under-delivered, given the expectations going in. Roget Chahayed, he's also nominated this year. Roget Chahayed, you know, he's only been around for like a few years, but damn, he's produced some pretty significant hits in that short amount of time. Like, he really hit the map, like in 2016, producing for rappers like D.R.E. He produced an early song for Travis Scott. It was on that Birds in the Trap Sing McKnight project. This was like 2016 as well. But his biggest breakthrough came in 2018 when he produced the hit for Travis Scott and Drake, Sicko Mode. Yeah, that was Roget Chahayed. That was a major hit. And then since then, he's produced, you know, a couple songs for like Doja Cat in 2018. He produced a couple things for Carly Rae Jepsen. He produced several songs from Big Sean's Detroit 2 album. Produced a couple songs on Nas's Kings Disease. I mean, co-produced, you know, Hit Boy did most of the work on Kings Disease 1 and 2. And Hit Boy's nominated in this category this year as well. But he produced a hit for Kali Uchis. He produced a couple major songs from Doja Cat's Planet Her album, which is Grammy nominated all over the place this year, including the hit song Kiss Me More featuring SZA. I think that one landed like number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. He produced a couple more songs for Nas's Kings Disease 2, the songs Composure and Brunch on Sundays. A song for Baby Keem, who's nominated this year as one of the best new artists. And I think he's got a couple songs nominated elsewhere in the rap categories as well. Another nominee this year is Mike Elizondo. Now, Mike Elizondo, if you don't know, like, he's got to be one of the most underrated names in music when it comes to musicianship, production. Like, look, I'm actually going to do a video just doing a deeper dive on Mike Elizondo, because I feel like he almost needs to be studied in terms of how much he's done over the past, like, 20 years. I mean, you could extend that to 25 years if you want to talk about his early work, just playing bass for albums like The Firm. That was like that Nas, Foxy Brown, AZ, and Nature collaboration where Dr. Dre produced like Phone Tap. But the thing is, Mike Elizondo kind of became Dr. Dre's go-to guy for the bass. So like when Dr. Dre released that 2001 album, The Chronic 2 some call it, but the 2001 album, you know, with like Forgot About Dre, What's the Difference, Still D.R.E, The Next Episode, Mike Elizondo was all over that album playing bass. He played bass all over like Nelly Furtado songs around that same time, like 99, 2000. He played bass all over Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP album. Snoop Dogg's The Last Meal album, Ice Cube's War and Peace, Exhibit's highest profile album, that was Restless. That song X, and front to back, that all these is in here. Oh no, let's get drunk in for show. Basically, all of those iconic sounding West Coast-ish songs that you were hearing at the turn of the century, Mike Elizondo was playing bass on a lot of that music. Eve's album from 2001, Scorpion, that's where she had like Let Me Blow Your Mind with Gwen Stefani. Yeah, Mike Elizondo's on that too. Mary J. Blige's Family Affair, dun 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 dun. Like, Mike Elizondo was playing on that song. So if you look at his like production discography, it's just ridiculous. So now he's being recognized more so as a producer instead of just like an instrumentalist, like a session musician who, you know, his names were in the endless. Like you open the Chronic 2001 and, you know, all the albums that he's on, you'll see the name throughout the years, Mike Elizondo. But this is, I believe, his first nomination in this production category. And it's largely because he produced a rock album for Turnstile. That Glow On album was produced by Mike Elizondo, which is kind of seen as a very, you know, versatile for being like a punk and hardcore punkish album. It's got like parts where there's progressive rock, psychedelic rock, you know, all kinds of variations. And it just so happens Mike Elizondo was the producer of that album. He also produced some songs by 21 Pilots. He produced songs for like the Jonas Brothers. A couple years ago, he produced for like Tori Kelly and some stuff for Gary Clark Jr. Also produces for a very like a smaller band. I mean, one of those kind of punkish bands who play much smaller venues. The band's called The Regrets. Oddly enough, Mike Elizondo produces for them too. But yeah, he's just so esteemed and accomplished. And it's interesting to see him actually nominated in the Producer of the Year category. As I mentioned, Hit Boy is also featured here and nominated for Producer of the Year. And if you look at Hit Boy's production discography, it's really interesting. Like, he first made a big splash. I mean, he was producing stuff in 2009, but it was really in 2010 when he did the song Drop the World. That was the Lil Wayne song after the Carter 3 when Lil Wayne released the Rebirth album when he was doing more rock and rollish stuff. He had a song featuring Eminem called Drop the World. Hit Boy produced that, and then Hit Boy famously produced Niggas in Paris, that Watch the Throne song with Jay-Z and Kanye West, that ding 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 ding. Yeah, that was Hit Boy's first like bona fide smash hit. And then that same year, he produced some of the biggest hits from, you know, that Cruel Summer album. So you're talking Cold, you're talking Click. Yeah, that was Hit Boy. You might have thought that was mostly Kanye West, but those were Hit Boy hits. And he also produced Goldie, which was like an early A$AP Rocky song from that first Long Live A$AP album. It was after that early mixtape by A$AP Rocky with Pesos on it. But yeah, Hit Boy produced Goldie by A$AP Rocky. But he's really being featured here because of his assistance in Nas's true like resurgence, his career resurgence with Kings Disease 1 and 2. This came on the heels of that rather disappointing Nasir album that was produced by Kanye West, that 7-song Kanye West album. Hit Boy, again, produced Kings Disease 1, which was the winner of Best Rap Album in last year's Grammys. And then Hit Boy produced Kings Disease 2 by Nas, which is arguably, and I think it's actually better than Kings Disease 1. And it's also nominated this year for Best Rap Album. So that's 2 Best Rap Albums nominations for Nas. So it's like, damn, he's really getting a lot of his flowers. I mean, he should have been nominated and a winner of some of these Grammys back in the day with some of his early to mid albums. But hey, better late than never. And he's really getting some love with Kings Disease 1 and 2. And again, Hit Boy is nominated largely because of his work on those 2 albums. By the way, Hit Boy and Nas just released another album called Magic. And I've already heard this thing twice. It is incredible. I love this Nas album. But yeah, Hit Boy nominated here, as is Ricky Reed, who, you know, pretty much hit the scene in like 2011, 2012, produced a song called Anyway by CeeLo. He did a couple songs for the Far East movement in like 2012. And then it was the Jason Derulo song in 2013 called Wiggle. Actually, it was his second hit. His first big hit was Jason Derulo's Talk Dirty. So yeah, Ricky Reed did Talk Dirty by Jason Derulo, and he did Wiggle featuring Snoop Dogg by Jason Derulo. Then after that, he did some work with Fifth Harmony, like the song Boss. Now we're getting into like 2014. And then if you like fast forward a few years worth of, you know, great work, by the way, but if you fast forward a few years, you know how I mentioned he was nominated in this category a couple years ago. That was because of his work with Lizzo. He did like the hits he did most of the production on that 'Cause I Love You album, including the hit songs like Juice. You know, the year just prior to that, he produced Leon Bridges' Good Thing. And this year, he's being nominated largely because of his work for Leon Bridges' new album. He produced the whole album for Gold Digger Sound. He produced Rumors with Lizzo and Cardi B. That was a pretty big hit. He did that Aguardiente y Limon song by Caliuchis. He did Can't Let You Go. That was a song on Terrace Martin's new album. It was featuring Nick Grant. And he did the song Piece of You by Shawn Mendes. So he's done pretty good work in this past year. So who do I think should and will win in this Producer of the Year non-classical category? You know, I think that Jack Antonoff finally should win this damn award. Look, I know that Lorde's Solar Power didn't deliver in the way that Melodrama did, which was also produced by Jack Antonoff, and he didn't win it this year. But you know, him producing St. Vincent's Daddy's Home album, St. Vincent is, again, one of the more critically acclaimed albums of the year. It's also up for the best album in the best alternative music album category. And the fact that Jack Antonoff also did that, very underrated in my opinion, Lana Del Rey, Chemtrails Over the Country Club album. I mean, he did Norman effing Rockwell as well, which again, he didn't win for that one. But, you know, if it wasn't for how good Norman effing Rockwell was, I feel like Chemtrails Over the Country Club would be more appreciated if, again, Lana Del Rey didn't have such a good album-by-album track record to this point. But, you know, he also produced Sling by Claro. But, you know, and he did the Bleachers album. I'm kind of leaning Jack Antonoff as it stands. Look, Roget Chahayed has done some amazing singles over the past, like, few years. And Kiss Me More with Doja Cat and SZA, I mean, that's major. So is that song Ain't Shit by Doja Cat. I mean, Roget Chahayed produced that one from the Doja Cat Planet Her album as well. I mean, he did Vibes by Zayn. And Lazy Susan by 21 Savage and Rich Brian. Hit Boy, again, did those two amazing Nas albums, but only one of those is within the year of eligibility for this award. So it's basically King's Disease 2 that you're looking at, as well as producing the album Judas and the Black Messiah, which has some pretty good songs on it. So that was Hit Boy's, the bulk of Hit Boy's work over the past year. I mean, he actually produces and works on songs with Roget Chahayed, I mean, pretty frequently. Like, there's a song on Big Sean's Detroit 2 called Why Would I Stop? And Hit Boy and Roget Chahayed produced that one. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Jack Antonoff here. I mean, maybe partially because it's long overdue, but I also think that he just had a breadth of work, and it wasn't as like singles based as as Roget Chahayed, but you know, doing complete albums, which I mean, Mike Elizondo, as I said, did the Turnstile Glow On album, which I really think is kind of a special rock and roll album in an era where rock and roll isn't the major genre, right? But yeah, I'm gonna go Jack Antonoff to win this award finally for Producer of the Year non-classical. But yeah, let me know what you think about this year's nominees. What do you think about the category in general? Who do you think between Jack Antonoff, Roget Chahayed, Mike Elizondo, Hit Boy, and Ricky Reed do you think should be the winner this year in Producer of the Year? Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.